Welcome to a bonus lesson in week 5 of the Elevated Female Wellness. And this is actually going to be split into two parts because there is so much to say. And I thought I'd start with part one. So I'm going to actually just make myself a little bit smaller so you guys can see the slide and you can see the slide, okay? And I've got it on my um, iPad here as well. So if I'm looking down, that's where I'm looking. I was actually looking at my notes for each slide as well. So first of all, full transparency, as I always do, all my information is taken from research. It's taken from people that I trust and value and who I've sense checked where they get their information from. And this slide today, this presentation, is part of information from the wonderful scientist that is Dr. Lisa Mosconi. She is amazing and looks into the how the hormonal changes like menstruation, perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, what that effect has on our brain through CT scans. So it's very much black and white data, which I love. And then there's also Dr. Mindy Peltz, who's just an absolute goddess and a queen in the menopausal years, who really is setting the stage and again giving us a lot of data to work with and a lot of information. So this is a combination of those two, and I absolutely love their work, what they stand for, who they are as people. And what I'm going to show you today is, I believe, fundamental to why there's so many diseases and hormone imbalances in females. So without delaying, let's get started. I'm going to talk to you today about dysregulation. Move my face out the way. Dysregulation. Now, dysregulation, what do we mean by that? Because again, this is taken from Dr. Mindy Peltz, and its definition is abnormality of an impairment in the regulation of a metabolic, physical, or psychological process. Now, it can be all of those three. It doesn't have to be one individual. So, if you can't go, for example, a period without eating, whether that be 8 to 10 hours or longer, 13 to 15 hours, you might have a metabolic dysregulation or a state of metabolic upset. Now, it's the same thing with me. So my journey started was I just could not say no to processed foods in terms of Skittles and M&Ms. I was what I thought was addicted, but actually I was in a state of metabolic deregulation or dysregulation. We think about perimenopause, ladies who have either gone through it or are going through it or are going to go through it. When you change from that cycle of having a menstrual cycle to then perimenopause, guess what happens? You go through a total hormonal dysregulation and hormonal change. So whether you sail through that change or whether it happens with a lot of pain, discomfort, which is unfortunate, the reality for many females, this causes a form of dysregulation within our body or within your body. If you can't sleep, this is another dysregulation of your circadian rhythm. Think about things like our HRT. Why are there so many females on HRT, especially in the UK, in the United States? If we compare this to like Japan, where again the research is saying where around 4% of women in the population are on HRT. That is such a low amount compared to what the UK and the US are. Why is this? It's because our fast-paced lives are causing systems to become dysregulated. And we're going to go into that in more detail in a minute. Now, hopefully, over the last 4 weeks, you've all learned about more and more about the importance of quality food and how the food system, as we know to date, is totally dysregulated, which really affects our metabolic gut health. It affects our hormones, it affects our emotions, it can affect our entire nervous system. So another example is those of you that go on holiday, and I know I work with one of you in particular who goes on holiday and comes back and gets ill. Why is that? Why is it when you go and have a time off, a period away from your life, when you come back, do you get ill? This is not your body fighting against you. This is your body talking to you. And we're going to go into this in more detail. So, symptoms, ladies, are our body's way of communication, not something new, not something life-changing. Hopefully, you all know that. But I do think a lot of us ignore our body symptoms. And the first thing we can do is actually start to listen to them instead of taking a pill or instead of just blaming our bodies. If we look at the amount of diseases and the disease, especially in the UK, in America, I was shocked when I saw the statistics that of autoimmune diseases, 80% are women. Okay. If we look at women in menopause and postmenopause, why do 50% of them have thyroid issues, thyroid problems? Why is this? It's because we've ignored our body symptoms earlier on, which means we've got to a state where the symptoms are taking over our complete brain, our daily functions, and our ability to perform in this day and age. The most common decade for women to commit suicide is actually between the ages of 45 to 55. And guess what that is? That's that prime age of perimenopause. Again, not a coincidence. And again, when you ignore your body's symptoms of communication, this is when things like anxiety can go high, emotions are high, you can gain and store fat, as we learned from the previous lessons on cortisol. You could not sleep, you can be in a state of insomnia, and you are very easily triggered. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my story because this everything I'm teaching today is what I've been through myself. And this state of dysregulation for me meant that I was in a state of overthinking. I actually started gaining belly fat, back fat. My face honestly felt so inflamed and I felt puffy, like my fingers awake in the morning would be so like fat. I would wake up with joint pain despite going to the gym and despite working very hard on what I thought was healthy food and what I thought was, going exercising was the way forward and the only way to lose weight and basically starve yourself in a calorie deficit, eating, synthesized proteins and emulsifiers and things like that. I got to a point where I couldn't sleep, waking up in the night, just like hours laid in bed, like, oh my God, why am I not sleeping? Why am I not sleeping? No meditations were working. And the biggest thing for me was I had extremely painful periods to the point where honestly, my mum, bless her, was saying, like, you need to go, you've got endometriosis. My loved ones were worried about me, but I just had a little bit of that stubborn streak where I was like, I'm going to sort my body and help my body naturally. The biggest thing for me as well was the pain that I would be in every month was so debilitating that honestly, I would lay in bed and I had to go to bed with a nappy on, which is something now I look back and think, oh my God, your body, Nika. Going to bed with a nappy, a thick tampon, and two thick pads. That's how much I was bleeding and how much the clots were coming out to where I am today, having just had my period and genuinely having no pain. Feels, it's almost like, is this real? I always have to remind myself every month, is this real? And like I go to bed and every night I'll wake up and be like, have I bled the bed? And it's not happening. So this was my story. I noticed that both mentally and physical, when I was in this state, I would ask myself questions like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I'd always be on this constant like turmoil of like, am I doing the right thing in life? What more should I be doing? And then I'd feel guilty. And then in my state, I'd hit that what I call the effort button and eat sweets and almost punish myself and feel guilty for it and go to the gym the next day. And it was this constant cycle. The biggest thing for me though, and this is hopefully what comes across with me as a person, those of you that know me, is now even in the state where I feel like my metabolic system is more in regulation, my hormonal system is more in regulation, my nervous system is more in regulation, and what I'm working on now is my emotional state of regulation. It's not perfect, and as I shared with you the other day, I can easily, if I'm emotionally dysregulated, what happens to me is I overeat. It's my trigger. And my now next step along my journey of wellness and self-development, as we always are learning about ourselves, is to work on understanding my emotional triggers because some people, when they are emotionally triggered, they starve themselves. I'm the opposite. I'm an eater. I'm a snacker and an eater, and I won't stop. Whether that's healthy food, now, thank God for my hormones, I still will overeat. Now, overeating, ladies, even if you are eating healthy food, is still overeating. It's still putting your liver under extreme work, exhaustion, and it's still a form of a coping mechanism. So everyone has their own coping mechanism. You know what yours is as well, and mine is overeating. So this is the next part I'm working on is why I hit the button of, okay, I'm going to go for it when I'm emotionally triggered. Just make sure I've got written everything down here. And yeah, my biggest thing before sorting out the metabolic and hormonal regulation was honestly, I thought I was addicted to M&Ms, Skittles. I honestly thought there's no way I'm ever going to give this up. And I'd lay awake worrying about how on earth am I going to stop this because, like your teeth. And I was like, once I eat, I can't stop. So it was a real panic for me, and it really affected me. So in this presentation, the four aspects of female dysregulation is what we're going to detail right now. So grab your pen, grab your notebook, and let's get started. The first is metabolic dysfunction. Now, this is where if you can't go for a period of time without a fasting window. Now, remember, a fasting window is just the period that you don't eat. So whatever time that is at night or whatever time you wake up in the morning and you have your first meal, if you can't go for a period of between 13 to 15 hours, you are in a state of dysregulation. You are in a state of, well, your metabolic upset. So for me, the burnout happened, and this moment of realizing metabolic dysfunction or dysregulation was I noticed my blood sugar was sky high, but also my cortisol was so high. So it was quite a tricky thing because I had two areas that were sky high. And I was basically in a constant state of stress. I was in a state of stress, pushing myself physically, mentally so hard to do more, to be better, to just keep going, 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 going. Which, okay, maybe you get away with in your teens and your 20s, but your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, ladies, if you're doing this to yourself, you are going to make the hormonal change extremely hard and difficult. And it doesn't have to be that way. My tool, which I thought would help because I was reading all the books when I first started this journey, was fasting. I thought, I'm going to fast. And ladies, when your cortisol is high and you are in a high metabolic dysregulation, fasting was not for me. Putting my body under more stress by fasting was genuinely not the right answer. So what I did is I actually leaned into more healthy greens. I leaned into my 2 grams of body weight of protein as I teach you. This for me really helped reset my metabolic system. The quality of food was key as well. So I really made a conscious effort to make sure that all my food was sourced organically, without those hidden chemicals, exactly everything I teach you. It was a real focus of mine. The other thing that I really weaned myself off was that I'd have at least a glass of wine a night to calm myself down. Now, this could definitely affect my metabolic system, but actually more so it did to my emotional and nervous system because I was like, why am I drinking? I don't actually enjoy the taste of drink. It just calmed me down. And that is another way of dysregulation, another symptom of dysregulation. The second one is hormonal dysregulation. So why do we think that in areas of the world like America and the UK, where HRT is given out like Skittles or like chocolate, why is it so high? It's because we're living in this fast-paced, stupid state of like almost on a hamster wheel where we're going a million miles an hour. And this is honestly why I believe so many women struggle with hormonal imbalances, struggle to go through perimenopause, struggle in menopause and even postmenopause, because you might have gone through the hormonal change to get to postmenopause. Sorry, I got itchy nose. However, ladies, if you're in that stage and you're still not sleeping or you have high anxiety, it's because one of these systems of regulation is not functioning. And we're going to go through each one at the moment. We've gone through two, but there's two more to go. We need to look into that specifically for you and work out a plan to help you regulate that system. So in my early 30s, I honestly was a stress monger. I would do absolutely everything. I'd push myself in the gym, push myself to be lean, be fit, be thin. And I'm thinking, All that need to push, 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 push was for what? Was for who? Because all that was happening is my hormones were in total dysregulation. The best thing for all of us to do is to chill out, to calm our systems down. I know that's not life breaking or life changing, but genuinely, we are all in such a fast paced hamster wheel that taking time out and slowing down to allow our systems to reboot is one of the key factors to rebalancing your hormones. The third system is the nervous system dysregulation. I love this. Or for those of you that know me, I'm also an animal chiropractor. So working on the nervous system for me is my real kind of kryptonite. I love it, and it's such a powerful system. Now, for those of you that don't know the work by Stephen Porges, the polyvagal theory is something I would really, really look into. And when I learned about this theory, I was like, oh my God, it explains the issues that I know in my family. It explains some of the issues I know within my friends, and it explains myself only 2 years ago. I was in what the polyvagal theory states as when you are in that state of fight and flight the whole time, you think a tiger's coming to get you, your brain is always on the go. What happens is you go into almost a frozen nervous state, and it's almost like a shutdown of your nervous system. You have inability to relax, and it's basically the opposite of where we need to be as humanity, which is actually in a state of community support, connection with one another, high amount of oxytocin. Except what a lot of us do is we go within ourselves, we isolate ourselves, we numb ourselves with TV, we totally distract ourselves with jobs and things that are seemingly important to do, but it's just another to-do list. And this puts us into this and can put us into a state of freeze and this shutdown of our nervous system. I know myself, the biggest thing I used to do was eat myself into numbness and then feel so disgusting and guilty and ashamed that I would then sit and watch Netflix and binge, numb my mind. I was in a state of shutdown. I was disconnected from my mind, disconnected from my body. I honestly had an inability to relax. Other people, as I've said over here, you might find that your state of dysregulation of your nervous system could be that you're not sleeping. It could be that you're having high amounts of cold and flus, abnormal amount of getting ill. This is your body's way of talking to you. The last one is emotion. So, emotional dysregulation. Now, I just had a bit of it left out the G there, varies depending. Obviously, this is not AI, this is me. There are mistakes. Now, emotional dysregulation can really have so many pieces to it, and it really depends on your story in life, your experiences in your life, and who you are today. So, I just want to clarify when you're emotional, doesn't mean if you cry that you're bad or you cry you've got emotional problems. The emotion side of dysregulation is when you allow your life experiences, whether they're good or bad, to define who you are today. When you are in this state, the research shows that it's that you're actually stuck in your amygdala and you're not in your prefrontal cortex. Now, when you are stuck in your amygdala, you only see life from your amygdala, which means that you look at everything as a threat. So you could be very anxious and you could be thinking, I need to act now, 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 and now. I need to do this task, this task, this task, because you're living in that constant part of your brain, of your amygdala, where you think the tiger's coming to get you the whole time. For me, if I'm on the road a lot and I don't give myself a day off, I get into the state of emotional triggering where everything triggers me, traffic, a person, anything. And it's because I'm stuck in that amygdala and I think the tiger's coming to get me. It is a skill and an art to bring yourself out of that and to bring yourself to calm down from the emotional dysregulation. I know for me, I can easily get into this state, and this is what I'm really working on at the moment. My next part of my life is understanding my traumas in life, understanding my triggers in life to why I react the way I do. And the answer to it, ladies, is it's takes time. It takes time, it takes reflection, it takes you acting on the responsibility of your emotions. I love this, which is chronic stress leads to chronic disease. Again, not something I'm sure you have heard of before. I see this in my loved ones. The chronic stress leads to chronic disease. Now, you might be sat there thinking, well, I know that and I've heard that before, but how does this help me? How do I know how to manage my chronic stress? How do I know what to do? The first thing we can start with is nurturing one of these four systems of dysregulation. So only you will know, and I really advise you to take some time, reflect, go through each one of what I said today, watch this again, and really focus on which one is in complete dysregulation. It might mean that you have to hire a professional in, it might be childhood trauma, it might be metabolic disease. That might mean that if you really isolate one of these systems to be priority, it might mean that you really focus in hard on that and hire a professional. I know a big thing was me for me was actually I did RTT therapy and I also worked with power therapy, which are professionals that work with the mind, but not in terms of just hypnosis. It was a cognitive psychosis where they would help me consciously go back to areas of my childhood which I don't remember consciously, but subconsciously your brain does remember, and understanding why even to this day at the age I am, I have thoughts of I'm not good enough. I don't have enough value, or I'm a people pleaser, understanding why I am this way. And it's normally, not always, but it's normally the story we tell ourselves from a trauma that happened many years ago. And that trauma doesn't have to be significant, like, the loss of a loved one. It can genuinely be when you were a 3-year-old and someone said something to you and you told yourself a story about that going forward, which could be haunting you for the rest of your life. That's when it's a really good idea to hire a professional. There are so many therapies out there, and I'd always recommend doing your research and going with someone who you resonate with. So, for example, with like metabolic tests, it could be that you could have food intolerances. It means you have to do specific blood testing. It could be understanding why you have intolerances as well. From a hormonal perspective, it could be understanding why your progesterone, estrogen, and/or testosterone is not in balance or what's happening, depending on where you are in the hormonal age. With the nervous system, it could be that you're struggling to sleep. It could be that you can't relax, you can't switch off, you're so anxious. From an emotional regulation, it could be that you're highly triggered. It could be that you take things very personally, which really holds you back for the rest of the day. Thank you so much for listening to part one. Part two will be released very shortly. I hope you have an awesome day.